Hello everyone. Once again, this is Amalia greeting you, a beauty business owner and mentor for beauty entrepreneurs. And not just that actually, but since my main niche is beauty and I have more beauty businesses, I always share from the perspective of my own business and mostly for beauty entrepreneurs. And today's topic is honestly one of my favorites. Although, to be fair, I probably don't have any topics I dislike, but the topic of administrators is just something incredible. I absolutely love this topic because so many people don't understand it or don't like it. A lot of people really genuinely resist the idea that this is a very important person, that they're not just a secretary, not just a cashier, but they actually play a huge role, carry a lot of weight in your business. And overall, they are the face of your business. And today I want to talk about just how important this really is, not trying to convince you, but simply sharing examples from my own experience, the mistakes I've made, the mistakes my students have made, and just in general, I really want to. I've prepared a plan here so I don't forget anything, as usual, on my computer. And I really want you to understand that anyone who starts a business honestly does not do it 100%, I'm sure you'll agree with me, to avoid seeing their family, to neglect themselves, or to not enjoy life. I mean, otherwise people would just work as employees, right? They wouldn't do anything else if someone who started a business actually wanted to live like that, like a slave. In fact, most people think the opposite, that it's the employees who are supposedly in slavery. But actually, if employees work for a good manager, then they're not in slavery at all. I would actually argue about the idea of managers being in slavery. Usually it's the managers themselves who put themselves in a kind of slavery with their super hyper control. I know better than anyone. No one can do it better than me. And besides, I have time anyway. I'll just sit in for the admin. And we don't think about very important things like the system or about how employees see you when you act like just another regular employee, just like them. And it's not about any kind of hierarchy, you know? Overall, we're partners with our employees. So it's a win-win. But the thing is, sometimes we want to be taken seriously as a leader, but that's simply impossible when you're working on the same level as them, right? And in fact, I used to do the same thing myself. In my case, there was always an admin. Honestly, I don't even know what kind of intuitive sense led me to do it, but from the very beginning, I had an admin. And there was a time when I had to fill in for her. It's true, the girl left, and I thought, it's okay, I'll work by myself for a while until I find someone else, just for a few days. So there weren't many of them. It was generally convenient for me, and the girl was very flexible. If I had asked her to come in for an extra day, she definitely would have worked something out with me. So in short, there was a period like that, but overall, I always had an admin and I never even thought about whether it was saving money or not. I just assumed by default that there had to be one because I understood that I have a child, I have a family, and I really might not be able to come to work. And what if I can't come in? Who's going to work there then? So it never even crossed my mind that a technician could get paid, that a technician could schedule someone, that a technician could answer the phone and book clients. It just didn't fit in my head. But unfortunately, the reality is that there are a huge number of salons, and in most of them, the service is basically non-existent. In the majority of cases, salons really don't offer any service. So there's either no administrator at all, or there's just one instead of two, or sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, or you walk in and technically they're there, but really they're not. They're off somewhere, and no one greets you, no one reschedules you, no one sees you off, no one offers you anything, and as a result, they end up losing business. And what are these problems connected to? The problems are mainly due to the fact that the owner, for example, A, is the one who hired the administrator, and the admin isn't really doing what they're supposed to. It's just that the owner doesn't know how to train them, or simply doesn't know how to give feedback, doesn't understand what exactly to say. Like, okay, yes, that's true. He doesn't like the admin's work, but he doesn't understand what the admin's job is supposed to be. And as I like to say, I always use brownies as an example. I say, guys, if you start making a brownie cake and you do it intuitively, most likely you won't end up with a brownie because, well, you can't make it just by intuition. Brownies have a recipe. And just like that, every employee has a checklist. There are rules, right, that need to be followed, because when there are no rules, no system, there's chaos. And I want to tell you why I still believe, and I really do believe, that this is correct. An admin is not just a secretary, right? This is actually the first problem in the beauty business. The manager tries to do everything themselves. That is, they're the cleaning service, sometimes the admin, the technician, the security guard, they handle rescheduling and make appointments. In other words, they do everything. They're the administrator, they make coffee, basically, they do it all. But let's think about it. How much energy will such a manager actually have? And I'm not even mentioning that the manager shouldn't be doing all this. The manager should be focused on strategy. But today we're talking about admin, so I won't be discussing strategy. And in 80% of studios, what I notice is that the admin is basically just a secretary, a person who just sits there, collects the money, and at best smiles. In general, it's rare for me to see an admin even stand up when a client walks in. But a real admin, in fact, is a salesperson. But that doesn't mean they're a born salesperson. They don't have to come to you already being a top-notch salesperson, selling like a pro. In other words, it's unlikely you'll find someone like that. What you really need to do is find a great person through the right hiring funnel based on a clear understanding of what kind of person you need, what type of employee you're looking for. You need to ask the right questions and conduct the interview properly, because if you just ask about salary, where they've worked, and what experience the administrator has, you won't find a good administrator at all, right? And this is when they look for experienced admins. In my mind, experienced admins are people who have worked there for 10 years, 5 in some salon or different salons, and they kind of know their stuff. They are techies, they know the salon's topics. What knowledge could such a person possibly have? I believe that in our reality, such a person, on the contrary, is impossible to retrain by default, because something, whether it's a habit or a mindset, he's been working for 5, 6, 10 years in a completely different system. And he'll come in and say, bye, I used to make money much more easily. And you need young people, mostly those with no experience at all, which is fine, or with very little experience, where they haven't yet been spoiled by other managers who just gave them money for nothing. And they've kind of gotten used to that. And really, in their world, they think someone is always trying to cheat them or pay them less. But I believe that a good admin should earn a very high salary, higher than the market rate, but only for delivering results. If they're just coming in, sitting around and getting paid, they shouldn't be earning a high salary. Unfortunately, the reality is that in Moscow, I had a girl who was paid 4,000 per shift plus a percentage of the revenue. I told her, you're out of your mind. I said, of course she's going to stick around and absolutely adore you. She'll never leave because there just aren't many bosses who pay that kind of money for someone to just sit there. Well, I don't know if there really are such people, but then it turned out there are. There really is such a trend in the market where people who can afford it, maybe not just because they lack financial literacy, but because they have some other source of income and they're not doing business for the money, but for various other reasons, or they simply don't count their money. These people really do offer high salaries. And then other administrators, seeing these salaries on the market, refuse to accept anything less. But I always believe that you can always find the right person for your goals. For your goals, meaning to train them. There will always be people who are not just looking at the money. And I want to tell you that these girls I'm talking about, they won't go for a high salary, because when they see this 4,000 per shift, they realize damn, they won't be able to do the job that well. So in a way, the salary also acts as a filter. By the way, that's also a very important point. When you list a high salary, you actually filter out some really great girls, because if they're inexperienced, they look at it and think, damn, if I go for that salary, they'll probably expect a ton from me. And I'm, trying to get my first job, I'm 19 or 20 years old. You see what I mean? So that's another kind of filter too. So there's this thing I hear very often, I've just gone on maternity leave, or not even just gone, I'm on maternity leave, my baby is still very little, but I feel like I have to go back because it seems like things are a mess there. Basically, I need to go back and sort things out. This is the worst thing an owner or an admin can do in general. I do have admins, but they're there, but they don't sell. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that they should be selling by default automatically. The point is, in general, a manager is responsible for training their administrators. And I want to tell you that I actually have a training program just for admins. And of course, in my flagship product, yes, in Scaling Your Business, there's an entire module dedicated to admins. Very large, very comprehensive. But I also have a separate training called Admin for a Million, which is very affordable. It costs only 33,000 rubles. But I want to tell you about this training. It's truly worth its weight in gold, and it's available as a recording. But right now, we have different options available. If you're interested, be sure to write to us, leave a comment, and we'll get in touch and tell you more. Because at first, this training was only available as a recording, but then we decided to expand it, realized it was extremely popular, and that some people really need feedback. That goes for administrators as well. And now we have mentors who will support you, even when you take the training for admins. And what does that mean? It means the training itself is really great because it consists of 2 modules. One module is for entrepreneurs who want to hire. That is, it covers how to hire, how to motivate, and what kind of motivation system to build. And things like that, right? And there's a module specifically for admins, which you can simply give to your administrators without having to explain anything to them. So in fact, you can save a huge amount of time and nerves, because what usually happens is that when people really want to hire an admin, they get so exhausted. Someone comes in, you explain a ton of things to them, then they leave or they just stop showing up. Maybe they quit or they work for a week and you don't like them, so you have to hire someone else and then you have to explain everything all over again. But here, you see, you simply save yourself a huge amount of time and money, because the faster you get your administrator up to speed, the better and more powerful your results will be. So here's what I want to tell you. The 3 biggest and most common mistakes that beauty entrepreneurs make when hiring an administrator. When you have an admin, even a good one, but they don't sell. In other words, they're shy. You see that they don't know how and you haven't trained them yet. So they just greet guests and you end up losing a lot of money here. The second mistake is not having a system. That is, you haven't set clear tasks for your admin and they don't understand what they should and shouldn't be doing. So for them, it's like, well, they come in, count the cash register, then hand over the cash, smile at everyone, make coffee or tea. But this really doesn't affect anything. Well, at most, your customer loyalty. But nowadays, even that doesn't really influence loyalty. And an administrator without training is basically a blind pilot, a completely blind kitten who has absolutely no idea. Okay, you might say, sell, but how? Rebook appointments, but how? You need to give the person scripts. By the way, in my trainings, I always provide absolutely all the documents, all the scripts. Everything is already prepared and ready to go. You just need to take it and adapt it for yourself. And, if you don't know how to assign tasks to the admin, they'll just sit on their phone watching reels because, well, they've done the task they thought you gave them. Basically, they've scheduled everyone, reminded everyone, they've kind of smiled at everyone. But as far as they're concerned, they've completed all their tasks. But the actual tasks are completely different. So what does a strong administrator actually bring to the table? When you train them and they really start doing what I'm talking about, yes, rescheduling clients. By the way, an admin is all about the 3 Ps: sell, suggest, reschedule. Just remember that. In other words, they absolutely have to do these 3 Ps. And when you hire an admin, you need to conduct the interview with this in mind. You need to understand whether the person is even capable of making suggestions, because there will be people who say, I won't do anything. No, I won't suggest anything. Why? No, that's awkward. That's it. They're not right for you. And I want to tell you that your revenue will increase by 30 to 40% seriously when you train your admin and they start upselling really well for you. What does it mean to upsell? They'll understand that they have a target to meet. By the way, every administrator should have a daily target and they should get some extra money for it. In other words, they should get a base salary and not a percentage of the revenue. Honestly, giving a percentage of the revenue is just crazy. But instead, they should get bonuses for completing their tasks and meeting their financial targets. That's actually their main responsibility. And then you might say, for example, my dear admin, here's your target. If you hit it, you'll get this much extra. They'll say, okay, but how do I do that? And you need to explain it to them because people need things explained. What does it mean to upsell? And here you really need to understand yourself. What does upselling actually mean? Because we make a huge amount on upselling, really 30% of our revenue comes from upsells. An increase in returns by 100%. When you have a loyal, great admin, when they call the client base, when they collect feedback, of course, the rate of returning customers goes up. The level of service increases, there are fewer lost clients, appointments are more organized because there are fewer reasons for people to turn you down, right? And of course, there's also monitoring the performance indicators of the specialist schedules. Plus, a good admin is always like a really great navigator for your staff as a whole. That is, they know everything, they handle everything, they're stress resistant, and they truly enjoy their work. Being an admin is not a job for the faint-hearted or the weak. It's a profession for very strong people. Strong people who can really stand up for their own boundaries and, if necessary, defend the boundaries of the staff as well. Or maybe, on the contrary, they can handle a situation very clearly and correctly, but again, they need instructions. They need to understand, what should I do in each situation? Okay, they're cool. They're flexible like that. But if you don't tell them directly, like, look, if we mess up here, please do it for free. They won't just do all that on their own initiative. They might really want to, but they don't have the authority. That's why all of this needs to be spelled out and discussed in their job description. I want to tell you that just recently there was an example. A girl came to me for a paid consultation. The studio's turnover was about 1 million, maybe a little more, I think, one-on-one. And there were 2 administrators. They worked very well with the client base. They tracked every repeat appointment very precisely. They sent reminders, offered bonuses for the next procedure to encourage rebooking. And this was a system. So there were 2 admins. In other words, it was a safety net. If something suddenly went wrong, there was always a second person who could step in as a replacement. So it's always a safety net. I say the number 1 is always very risky. It's very risky to work with just one person, because when you have only one admin, if they suddenly get an idea in their head or even just get sick, that's it. You're left without an admin. But when there are 2, that's your safety net. I want to tell you that there was a time when my admins were, very client-oriented, all very nice people. Until one day an administrator came to me, and by then I was already working according to this system. So I already understood everything clearly. I was on top of things, but I still couldn't figure out how to find a person who would actually enjoy the work. Because everyone was working, but somehow things just weren't going smoothly for them. And then a girl came to me and said, she was already on her shift, and she said to me, Amalia, hello, I wanted to share with you that I have this plan for today. And based on the appointments, I've already, if there aren't too many cancellations, I've already done this much. And I still remember how she said, the goal is to do this much more. I think I can do it. I even know how to do it. And I was thrilled. I didn't know whether she would actually do it or not. But in reality, a person with that kind of attitude, who clearly understands the plan, the actual numbers and the goal, is truly motivated and works hard towards it. When someone wants to achieve something, they succeed. Of course, it's clear that they won't meet the plan every single time. Anything can happen. There are cancellations, there are rainy days, there are even flu seasons when there are a lot of cancellations. People have things like the first day of school on September 1st, and at that time, they're just not thinking about this at all, and so on. But the main point is, when a person truly understands, like I explained everything to her, it resonated with her. She needed the money. She clearly understood how to earn it. She had a completely reasonable attitude toward her work, and she genuinely enjoyed it. At the same time, there were a lot of people who came in and didn't end up working for me because, oh my God, there's so much to do. The fact that in the end they would be earning more than the market average doesn't interest anyone. That's why it's so important to hire the right person. Absolutely not everyone will think the way you do, and not everyone will think that it's okay, right? You don't need to try to please everyone in general. That's why I still believe that if you look, you'll see that after her, I only had admins like that because, that was the point of reference. As if, the starting line was set with her, I realized who I needed. It's very important to have a clear picture of the employee you want to see, both in terms of character and energy. By the way, we talk a lot about this as well, both in the Admin for a Million course, which is a separate training, and at the Scale event. Because everything starts with hiring. You can't turn a quiet mouse into a top-notch admin. Of course, you need to hire girls who are already active and stand out. And if, for example, you don't know how to spot a weak admin, you need to understand one thing. Let me share a secret with you. The interview should be conducted in a group, and you'll very easily be able to spot the weak ones among the rest. They usually stay quiet, they hide, they don't speak clearly, they can't answer questions, they get lost. These people are not right for you. When you conduct a group interview, you need to know how to do it. You need to know the process, because if you don't, you'll just end up sinking. If you gather a group, you might just scare everyone off. People always left my group interviews not exactly thrilled because it was the first time they'd seen something like that, and they would say, wow, that was really something. And when you don't tell people that it's going to be a group interview and 10 or 12 people show up, they realize, whoa. You can even see by their reactions how comfortable they feel in such an awkward situation. What else I want to say about interviews? Again, if your office job posting is terrible or incorrect, if you're not getting any applications and only your colleagues are coming to you, you'll never hire a great admin that you can actually work with. That's why the hiring funnel for an administrator needs to be wide. You need to have a lot of people knocking on your door so that out of all those, at least 10 or 15 make it to the interview stage. Well, at least 7 in the end. Because if you only get calls from 1 or 2 candidates, it's unlikely you'll be able to choose the right one. It's really hard to hit that bingo. And what do I want to tell you? I truly believe that the administrator is the key to a business's success. The whole team is important, but the administrator is a crucial link. It's your face, how they dress, how they look, whether they smile or not, how open they are to people and to the world in general. If, when hiring or even after hiring a great person, you don't set the right tasks, you can easily demotivate a highly motivated person, and they might leave you because they're not getting that growth or recognition at your workplace, in your salon, in your business. And in order to unlock the potential of a great employee, you need to clearly understand, step by step, what to do, how to do it, how to talk to them, how to assign tasks, and know their strengths. And my 2 admins each have different strengths. One is excellent at making calls, the other is great at rescheduling appointments. One of them is good at selling, while the other is not as strong in sales. And we simply know what to focus on. I understand that. Okay, this one sells well, so she should be assigned to sales. She needs more recognition here, more motivation, and you should ask her to come in for extra shifts. For example, on client days, make sure to ask this admin to come in because she will be better and more effective at making sales. And with another administrator, on the contrary, for example, if they're better at making calls, assign them to focus on call motivation. So they sit and make more calls than the other administrator because they're better at it and really do it with enthusiasm. And with that, I actually want to wrap things up. If you really want an awesome system in your business and a business that delivers great results, truly start with the administrator. Everything is important, marketing is important, and so is hiring all employees in general. But believe me, if you don't put a good administrator in place, if you don't know how to work with them, and if you don't give them instructions on how to work with others, that is the upsell matrix, working with the same specialists. What is allowed, what is not allowed? What kinds of tasks do people usually approach the administrator with? For example, you need to explain to them that they are your ally, not the ally of your employees. You need to explain to them that there's no need to be friends with anyone. You're just here to work, right? You need to explain that if someone comes and says, don't schedule me for 6:30, I want to leave as soon as the clock strikes 8, you have to tell them that's not allowed. If we find out that you're scheduling appointments for some people and not for others based on private agreements, it will end badly. A person needs to understand the scope of their responsibility and the importance of knowing what they can and cannot do. That's how they build relationships with others. If you don't explain all this, don't be surprised if you have a significant turnover. And when you have a bad admin, you'll have a high turnover because the admin is the first person people see when they come in. The greater the turnover, the weaker the business actually is. And in my trainings, the best thing, what really excites everyone, what makes everyone happy, is that all the trainings include checklists. We have everything checklists, all job descriptions, everything, absolutely everything. That is, everything is ready-made. You just need to take it and, of course, tweak it a bit for your own needs. You can't just take my job description and copy it entirely because obviously even something as simple as your work day starting at 9 in the morning while mine starts at 10 makes a difference. Naturally, you need to read it and make some adjustments. Maybe you don't feel comfortable finding them for being late, then okay, don't find them. But at least you'll have something you can rely on, and that will save you a huge amount of money and time. And of course, I want to encourage you, if you haven't subscribed to me yet, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm not as active here, but there is a lot of great material you can check out because I absolutely love making videos, useful videos, talking about all sorts of different aspects of business. And overall, I am 100% sure that even my free videos on YouTube and Instagram provide people with a huge amount of value. Be sure to follow me on Instagram. There, I also share a lot of tips as well as my life and my experiences. Definitely check out my Salon's page. See how beautiful it is, and you'll see that I'm not just talking for the sake of it. I truly practice everything I talk about. I have a lot of really cool mini products. And if you follow my Instagram page, you'll definitely see all kinds of interactions with the audience, any mini products, and various launches. But I want to encourage you, if you're watching this video and it's important for you to organize the work of your administrators, then be sure to check out the Admin for a Million training. Be sure to share your situation in the comments. Definitely write if you want to learn more about Admin for a Million. Either I or my team will definitely get in touch with you and explain everything in detail because this training has answered a huge number of questions for a great many people. Many people buy it and then keep renewing it endlessly because it's just an incredibly cool resource for any beauty entrepreneur who has realized how simple it actually is to work with an admin and integrate them into the workflow. Because onboarding is the most difficult and energy-consuming process. And when you make mistakes during this stage, of course, it can really knock you off your feet. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you have already drawn some conclusions, recognized some of your mistakes, and will go fix them tomorrow. I'll be waiting for your questions in the comments and see you in the next video.